The British East India Company. How did a corporation take over an entire subcontinent? Why did the Queen of England begin trade with India? For power and prosperity, of course. There were many factors that influenced the Queen's decision to allow trade in the East. Other countries were doing it. Naturally, the Queen wanted to maximize on the treasures of India. Trade with India would not have been possible without the discovery of the Cape of Good Hope around the base of Africa. In the late 15th century, the Dutch settled there first, but after battling the British and the French, the British became the ruling power of the colony in the Cape of Good Hope in the early 19th century. Spain, in the middle of the 16th century, felt their power over the Netherlands beginning to shrink and were ready to fight to bring it back. The Queen of England didn't want Spain to gain more power. Naturally, she intervened, and naturally, Spain retaliated. Then the Spanish Armada, which means naval fleet, ventured to attack England. The Queen was ready and won the battle. During the 16th century, power over other nations was a coveted thing. Let's talk about the Queen. Her life spanned from 1533 to 1603, which means that when she signed her famous agreement with the trade companies in 1600, she was a very experienced leader. Consider whether she could have imagined the implications of her decision to begin associations with India. By the time the contract was up for renewal, there was a new king on the royal throne, who made the company a stock company with separate investors for each individual voyage. It was the year 1615 when the ambassador Sir Thomas Roe was sent by King James I to meet with the Mogul and establish a foundation of English power and negotiate privileges for the English merchants. This was a monumental event because the Mogul Empire covered northern and central India and may have been the most civilized center of power at that time. Power continued to grow and expand. By 1708, the company had established 3 presidencies in India: Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. The power of the Mogul waned in these areas, and people were harassed by their local princes. This is when the company felt the need to be more involved in political and public affairs to protect their interests, and the shift in power began to grow. According to Gavin Rand and Kim A. Wagner in their book Recruiting the Martial Races, the company, I quote, relied on Indian soldiers, recruiting an army of sepoys trained by British officers after European military principles, end quote. The sepoy army protecting the company grew from 200,000 in 1820 to almost 250,000 in 1857. Clive was known for many things, but he made history when he led an army comprised of both British and Indians against Suraj-ud-Dawla in the famous Battle of Plassey. This win gave the company a chance to place a puppet on the throne who would help the British fight the French and who would also make Clive the commander-in-chief in Bengal. It was a win-win, but only for the British East India Company. Hastings is one of the biggest names involved. He was made general governor over all of British India. While he was serving, the Parliament back home was busy passing laws to regulate the company in India. They wanted more control and less corruption. Hastings didn't like being scrutinized by his superiors and found he cared more for the Indians than he did his own countrymen. Clive aided in an internal Indian war. His superiors charged him with corruption. Eventually, the India Act of 1784 placed the company under control of directors based in the homeland. Even though Hastings dealt with many controversies, his service brought Britain to a better place with Indian interests. Between 1847 and 1856, the man known as Dalhousie modernized India. Part of the justification of Britain's stay in India was the idea that India needed to be civilized. Among other things, he promoted education and changed social norms like allowing widows to marry. What was the impact of the Queen's decision more than 2 centuries earlier?
Personal letters and diaries describe the experiences of the rulers and the ruled. The British flag never flew over more powerful or united an empire than now. Never did our voice count for more in determining the future destinies of mankind.
Why do I regard British rule as a curse? It has impoverished the dumb millions. It has reduced us politically to serfdom. It has sapped the foundations of our culture.
Britain's imperial history is a story of contradiction, discovery and progress, prejudice and oppression.
The company's control ended in 1858, but power remained with Britain until their final exodus in 1947. As they transferred power, the country was divided and Pakistan was born. Today, the trade name of East India Company is still used by a company in London, but it is nothing like the original. And according to a man named Dalrymple in his book, The Anarchy, Walmart, which is the world's largest corporation in revenue terms, does not number among its assets a fleet of nuclear submarines. Neither Facebook nor Shell possesses regiments of infantry. The East India Company is our reminder of the potential for the abuse of corporate power.